Hello, everybody. I'm Joseph Smith, President and founder of Travel Tax and Travel Tax Canada. Today is Saturday, December 20th, 2025, on the cusp of not only a new year, but a new tax filing year. Today, I'm going to discuss two frequent forms that get filed by anybody who owns Canadian property. And when I say property, I mean primarily real estate. And typically in our practice, what we see are individuals that leave Canada and maybe turn their old principal residence into a rental. And there are two things along that timeline that occur. Number one is the rent that they receive on that home after becoming a non-resident, and secondly, a subsequent sale of that property. Now, the two forms that I am talking about, I'm going to sort of break out. Let's talk about the rental side first. When you are a non-resident of Canada with Canadian real estate that you rent, CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, prefers that there be a withholding agent in Canada that takes out 25% of your gross proceeds on a monthly basis and remits that to Canada Revenue. And then at the end of the year, you file a tax return to reconcile the difference, get a refund, etc. And that tax return has to be filed within 2 years after the close of the year. So if it is 2025, then that tax return has to be filed by the end of 2027. Now, 25% of gross is pretty high for the typical person who has a rental property and a lot of expenses. So there's an alternative where you file what is called an NR6. That is a Nancy Romeo 6 application of CRA, which will allow the withholding agent to only withhold 25% of your anticipated net profit. And of course, if that net profit is zero, that means there's no withholding. But this form has to be filed by the end of every year in anticipation of the following tax year. So this being December 20th, these have to be submitted by December 31st. For them to take effect. In times past, a lot of owners of real estate that was rented out, people who were non-resident owners, someone just ignored this. And they filed their special tax return before the deadline. But CRA has gotten a little bit more antsy or focused on compliance, so they want you to do one of these two things. So as we get towards the end of the year, the big picture is you're supposed to have an arrangement where there's a Canadian resident withholding agent that takes the rent, gives 25% of either gross or net to CRA on a monthly basis, and then at the end of the year, we file a return. Now, the only difference between 25% gross, 25% net, other than the money, is the fact that that tax return, if you are granted an NR6, has to be filed by June 30th of the following year. You can't wait 2 years on that. The second form that typically gets filed is when, let's say, this same rental property, the owner decides to sell. And here again, you have another 25% factor. CRA will typically request or require 25% of the gross sales price to be withheld and remitted to CRA by the end of the next month or end of the month after the sale. Or you can get what's called a clearance certificate, a T2062. If you request a T2062 and it's granted, then the withholding is 25% of the net. Now we know capital gains is only 50% of the actual gain as it's taxed, but this agreement still wants 25% of your net profit, of your net gain. And then you file a tax return at the end of the year to reconcile and receive a refund. That request has to be done either during a proposal period where you have a proposed sale or 10 days after the actual sale. And usually you have to get your barrister, your closing agent, whoever is involved in this process to be involved in this. We do both of these filings for you. We have a worksheet we'll give you if you're anticipating needing these, but it's something to consider if you are a non-resident owner of rental property or even a non-resident who left Canada and still has any kind of real estate sitting around and it's time to sell. You're going to have 25% of the gross sales price or 25% of the net profit. Either one is acceptable, but as we know, we'd much rather have the lower rate. So give us a call if these are forms that you need to get filed, or give us a call or reach out if you need more information.